Welcome to the Jazz Flyte podcast. I'm your host, Daryl Scott, and together we will dive into the lives and careers of the jazz legends who have left a rhythmic imprint on the world. Be prepared to reminisce on the highs and the lows of their musical journey and the trials that sculpted their timeless musical gems. We'll preserve the legacy of these extraordinary maestros and find inspiration in the melodies of their lives. Subscribe now and never miss a beat. Now, let's get to the show. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Jazz Flyte podcast. My name is Daryl Scott. We're going to have a good time today. If nothing else, we got 4 days worth of stories. Okay, maybe not 4 days, but we're going to have some good stories coming up here with our guest today. Our guest is Hendricks. Spent some time with Paul Hardcastle. I always found out that to be a neat name and all that sort of stuff. So, Rock, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Aloha from Maui, everybody. Great to be here with you all.
Okay, that's the first bone I'll pick with you.
I think you asked me about my name, Rock. I'll tell you all real quick. It's Rock.
Yes, that's the first one.
My mom was friends with Rock Hudson in the 1950s, and that's when I was born. Before rock and roll was really a name until Elvis came out. But she was good friends with Rock Hudson, and I got the name Rock. So there you go.
See, there's some people out there who are going to go, so he's named after The Rock? No, folks. There's another Rock. There's another Rock before that Rock. It's Rock Hudson. So, well, good. So
younger people don't know who Rock Hudson is. So all you folks out there that aren't older like me, he was the Brad Pitt of the 1950s. Yeah.
Brad Pitt. That's a good one. If I ever get the chance to meet one of them, that's what I will do. I go, hey, so you're actually the Brad Pitt of the 50s. Let's talk about the beginning of this career of yours. I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm going to throw it out there. You were born with an eye condition. So it took some time to get past that. So your hearing developed far faster than that. So how did the saxophone become a part of your life?
Well, I remember I was a little boy, born in Texas, but my dad was in the Army, and we moved to Germany. And of course, my mom thought something was wrong with me for a while there because I wasn't responding to anything. So they would put on these old 45s with, like Chuck Berry and Little Richard and stuff like that, and I would go in the crib. I had a little baby, and they go, "Hey, he's responding to this rock and roll music, and he loves the saxophone." And so they found out. Of course, I was blind till I was about 7, and I had operations. But sound was probably the first thing I really experienced, and as a baby, and I've thought serious blindness my whole life, on and off, and never really saw very good until a few years ago. And I had a bunch of experimental operations over on Oahu, and I was able to get 20/20 out of my left eye.
Mm-hmm.
But I just managed to survive and play music. My dad bought me a saxophone when I was a little boy, and by the time I was 15, I was like a child prodigy and playing with guys that are my age now, Yeah.
Who were some of those guys, and who were your influences while you were growing up at that young age? What saxophone players were you kind of following?
Well, when I was lucky to go to a high school that had a #1 jazz band, a big band in the nation, it was just a little town in the East Bay near Oakland, California. And was a high school kid, we'd sit around and listen to all all the jazz greats, from Charlie Parker, Coltrane, and Dexter Gordon, and but anyhow, some of my bigger influences, I'd say, on saxophone would be Dexter Gordon and John Coltrane. Uh, I loved the Crusaders. The Jazz Crusaders were probably
Hmm.
one of my favorite. Wilton Felder and of course, Stanley Turrentine.
Right.
And here's the thing I will say real quick about the new smooth jazz players that are all come out now. It's almost kind of like they're what we older sax players call cookie cutter sax style, so which is they all kind of sound the same, and you can't really like in the old days. If you listen to, you could hear Eddie Harris
Right.
or Stan Turrentine or Stan Getz or Dexter Gordon. You could tell immediately that was them. They had their own unique sound.
Hmm.
And that was the ultimate thing in jazz was to create your own original sound. It's funny in saxophone, everybody can have their own sound if they work at it. But today, everybody, if you notice, a lot of saxophone now all sound the same. Well, they go to these great schools and all these great colleges and stuff, and they come out and they're younger and stuff, but they're not developing into their own styles. There was a guy that came out in the '70s that created a whole new alto style, David Sanborn,
Yes.
and you could tell immediately that it was David Sanborn. And then everybody wanted to copy him. It was like Charlie Parker when he came out. Everybody wanted to
Okay.
copy Charlie Parker. But it's those innovators and those guys that have their own unique sounds. And the way to do that is to combine and listen to all the greats and get a little influence from here, from there, for a little bit of Stanley Turrentine, a little bit of Dexter Gordon, a little smidgen of that. And eventually that'll all coalesce into your own style. And that's kind of what I've done. And of course, I'm known for my own style.
Yes.
You
Speaking
know,
of your own style, let's take a moment and we'll thank Portia, our producer. We're going to hear a song that you are playing on the Jazz Flight podcast. Our guest today is Rock Hendricks. Done a lot of stuff, probably more so from a sideman standpoint as opposed to a soloist, but there's some solo stuff that he's got coming out. So Rock, 9 years old, you get the saxophone and you're playing and you're getting really good. And all of a sudden you're going out and what was unique about you that folks like Donald Fagen, Jeff Lorber, Dave Mason, Michael Bublé, I always wanted to say that, had called on you to assist them in the music that they were making?
well, I think in the music business, for everybody out there that's trying to come up through the ranks, it is a lot about word of mouth. And people, tell someone, oh, I know this great sax player. And that's how it always works. It's really more, the old days in Hollywood, they would have cattle call auditions and things, but no, it's basically word of mouth. Like, for instance, the way I got introduced to Motown was a guy that I grew up with playing in the hood in Oakland. He was a guitar player. His name's Greg Crockett. He ended up being a record producer at Motown and living at the Gordy's house for 20 years and was like one of my best friends growing up. Great guitar player, producer, incredible guy. Anyhow, he brought me in to play with Marvin Gaye's band. I'd moved from Hawaii. And anyhow, that's how I got into Motown and became like a funk brother at Motown, playing there for the Gordy family. And I was there when Marvin was killed by his father
Mm.
and was going to go on the tour with Marvin, but they kept me on at Hitsville there. And Hitsville is gone, and so is with them. Most of Motown is. They still have an office there, Joe Bett Music in Hollywood. But anyhow, I got to spend every weekend at Barry Gordy's and his sister's homes, partying it up and having a great time.
I'll have
And
to look on
that's
the
how,
hit. Go ahead.
yeah.
I was going to say I have to look at the Hitsville video and see if I can find you.
Well,
So
I
it was
remember Phil was in LA. They moved to
they moved
LA in
right.
1970. By the way, you're in Ohio. What city in Ohio are you in?
Cleveland.
Cleveland. Okay. That's where I have a 1946 King Super 20. It was owned by Lester Young at one of his saxes, but it's a 1946 King made in Cleveland. I played that sax since for 50 years now. I love it. But I was wondering if you're from Columbus because there's a guy that I played with for many, many years who I love dearly. He's passed on now, Bobby Womack. I
Oh,
was,
I,
I was,
I I knew
yeah,
of Bobby when I first started in radio.
yeah.
Radio station called WJMO. Bobby had stopped by, and he had a brother named Cecil. Uh,
Diesel.
right.
And yeah, yeah, it's
Uh, but they were
great.
very good, and I think most people don't know that Bobby was just as good a musician as he was a singer. He was a guitar player, if I remember correctly.
Guitar player, singer. I don't know how literate Bobby was as far as his, being able to read or write or write music. But the guy was a genius beyond
Hmm.
belief, and could he in rehearsals he would sing everybody their parts, either the guitar player or you were a sax player or a trumpet player. He would sing everybody, and he had in his head all the harmonies, and the guy was just incredible and a great performer. They started out singing with his brothers, doing gospel music, and his
Yeah,
father never wanted him to go on and play, popular music. But anyhow, Bobby was a genius of a songwriter and incredible performer. And oh boy, well, one of the greatest. Like when I got to play with Michael Jackson and Marvin Gaye, Bobby was right up there with those guys. Incredible guy and surely missed.
it's funny when you bring up names and artists and things like that. I have a very bad habit. In my office, which is where I am right now, there's music to the left of me, music to the right of me, and music in front of me. But now that you say Bobby Womack, I will go and hunt because I tried to put everything on alphabetical order. That
Yeah,
doesn't mean it happened. But I'll pull out a song and play it. While that song is playing, I
yeah.
think of another song. So the carpet in my office no longer is carpet. It is CD covers or album covers.
Well,
So then after 4 or 5 hours of doing this, it's like, oh, now I got to clean all this up. But it's great memories. It's great,
oh,
because you forget
things don't.
about certain songs
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
and then you play this and you play that. And it's interesting. The other thing is, I think you'll appreciate this. I was always a read the cover, find out who plays it. Um, like there's a Steely Dan album, which is their greatest hits, and it lists on the inside sleeve everybody who played in Steely Dan.
yeah.
I'm gonna look to see if you might be on there.
No, probably not.
No?
But did a lot of. I played. I played in. So I'm here on Maui. Walter Becker and Donald Fagen lived here, and they had a studio in Ulapalakua, which is a ranch over there where Oprah Winfrey lives. And I did a lot of recording with both of those guys there. And then we also would do gigs here together. Sometimes, like in other words, here's an example. I remember John McEnroe got married, and to Patty Smythe, and years ago, and Donald Fagen calls me and goes, "Hey, can we do this little wedding for my friend John McEnroe?" Anyhow, so it was basically we did that, and it's funny on that one. Donald goes, "You got to learn Danny Boy because they're Irish." But I think we did the longest version of Danny Boy that ever was. Like, anyhow, that was so Donald Fagen, Walter Becker, two guys that were kind of like Paul Hardcastle and I. Really, it's an incredible team together. And like I said, I did a lot of recordings with them. I've done so many recordings over the years. Who knows? Who? I mean, I have thousands that from the Funkadelics to the Steely Dan to you just name it. I kept lost track of all the albums. I can't keep track of them.
I can't imagine going from doing a Funkadelic session to doing a Steely Dan session. There are just some particulars that go on that you just go, these are two totally different. things that are going on.
Alex, I was on. I can't remember the name of the album now, but I've looked it up recently, and it was maybe when their third or fourth. But it was done in San Francisco at a famous studio called Wally Heider's, and that was one of my first really big major recording gigs. Was playing with the
Hmm.
Funkadelics, and I was pretty young then, maybe in my 20s. Now, I don't even really knew who they were, to tell you the truth. I didn't know.
I have two really good friends here who are Funkadelic fans. And I mean, they go to every concert, despite the fact I don't think this show changes a whole lot, but they just go. Um, you need to sit down and talk to them and tell them stories, but it would require some help if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Speaking,
I wish I could
speak,
remember the name of the album.
uh,
Don't, it has a weird name. It's two names, and I just
once
can't recall the
once
name.
once again, when this is done, I'm gonna go hunting for Funkadelic
I
albums and see if I can find them.
knew. Um, Another band group that I played with shortly was Sly and the Family
Rolling
Stone, and
Stone.
Greg was one of the guys helping produce the Funkadelics album. He's the drummer from Sly and the Family Stone. So if you can
Hmm.
find that record with Greg Rico, the drummer, that would be the album that I played on it. Wally
Okay.
High.
All right. I will.
But
Sly
yeah,
and the
I've got
Family Stone is over there.
stuff, and yeah, so
So let's talk about this relationship you have with Paul Hardcastle. How did this start?
you mentioned earlier about remote work and how people now, well, this is the big new thing in music. I mean, musicians now can record you can hire Steve Gadd to play drums on your track, and it doesn't cost a lot of money because he can do it from his living room while he's, staying at home. And so, anyhow, years before, 20 years ago, when working from via this was not, nobody was doing it. I got in touch with Paul. I've always been a big fan, and he lives in London. I was living in Hawaii, and at first, when I met him on Facebook, and I thought, oh, it's fake. It's got to be one of those imposters.
Right, right.
It really was him, and we put up a conversation, and one thing led to the next. He ended up sending me a track, and I played on it, and it worked out great. And we've had over 30 number one hits together now. When he puts a song out, it's number one first day. It pre-sells to number one. So, all the Jazz Masters and the Hardcastle albums. But anyhow, so we've had an incredible collaboration. But we started recording remotely together now, doing this for 20 years. And the magic has been amazing. And here's the thing that'll blow everybody away out there. We never have met face to face.
No?
No, we talk on FaceTime like we're doing right now, or whatever, or Zoom, and he's the kind of producer, which I think is a sign of a great producer. Never tells me what to do or ask for anything. So he leaves me in the dark. So when you listen to these songs and you hear the sax or any of the melodies or whatever's coming up, I have to think of them all on my own, and he doesn't give me any direction. And when I get the songs, it's like a fabulous Christmas present. I mean, because he's such a genius and so great. He'll send me the rhythm tracks and just leave it wide open for me to kind of, it'd be like Picasso said, I'm sending you a painting and I want you to paint a couple colors in there. I mean, I'm not writing the music or producing it, but I'm adding my little color, and he's going to let me add any color I want.
How do you, okay, my ignorance. Then how do you know what to play? Is
That's a
it
great
just like, is it just
question.
whatever I feel, or is you just do it?
And sometimes I'm stupefied. I'm like, what the hell am I going to play on this? And there's a song I sent you called Echoes Rising, which is an example of that I had no idea what to play. But I ended up racking my brain. And since I've always been a fan of his, here's the thing. I never wanted to step on his toes, like musicians say. I wanted to do compliment his music in a way that I didn't dominate, or I wanted to become a part of his music, not play over the top of him or overplay. And it helped me develop and even my style even more so by keeping things simple. I remember I grew up with the famous jazz guy, Lambert, John Hendricks, Lambert
Hmm.
Hendricks.
Remember Hendrick and Ross?
My mom was friends with him, and she named my brother after him. And John told me once when I was a young man, he goes, first you got to learn how to play fast, and then you got to learn how to play slow all over again. Because, uh, anybody can play a bunch of fast notes, but to play, it's example like blues players. Blues players use less notes, but they say more,
Hmm.
you know? So anyhow, a lot of times less is more. And that's why I love Dexter Gordon and some of those great players that didn't have to play a bunch of fast stuff to be to say it's like poetry. But anyhow, yeah. So Paul and I have some kind of magic, and who knows, folks out there, maybe if we met each other face to face, we'd ruin that
It might
magic.
all change. Speaking of your music, let's go. Let's listen to one more track from uh, Rock Hendricks on the Jazz Flight podcast. That is Echoes Rising with Rock Hendricks here on the Jazz Flight podcast. I, there are many reasons I'm envious of you. I can't play. I'm the guy. Everybody goes, Gerald, do you play anything? I go, no, I'm the guy that introduces the band. That's the extent of my musical career. That's it. And I've introduced a whole lot of people. But when you get out there and you do this stuff, and whether you're the lead guy or the side man, there's a great degree of responsibilities that you have that you have to perform, and you have to keep that performance, because it's like that performance that you're doing is also an audition for all the other artists out there that hear you and that may want to use you. Do you play with that kind of, I'll call it fear? Or do you just go, I just got to be good, and if they want me, they'll call me?
Well, here's interesting question. Good question. So, at the Apollo Theater, I played there many, many times.
Yeah.
You know how the old thing they send the hook out. If you don't, if
Yes.
it ain't happening,
Right.
you get pulled off the stage.
Right.
Well, Ray Charles was like that, and Bobby Womack was like that. If you bombed out on the stage, he's going to embarrass you right on the spot in front of the crowd. Kind of part of their act. Like in other words, if you screw up and you fail or from fear, and you show it, he's going to point it out to the crowd too,
Mhm.
and embarrass the hell out of you. And probably going to be on the bus the next day. The gig, but anyhow, that's just a part of the was the entertainment. And the thing is to never ever falter. You can be scared or fearful, but you can't let intimidation or fear or whatever get a hold of you. And of course, when you're on the stage on those big places, one of my favorite places in the whole country was the Fox Theater in Detroit.
Hmm.
Love that place. But there's so many beautiful concert halls all over that I played, every one in every city. But anyhow, when you're there on the stage, and plus my eyes were never that good, so I couldn't hardly see that great anyhow. But the lights are so bright, and you're like in a bubble. And if you're well rehearsed, you're with your band guys. You do your part, and everybody should play as a team. You know, and I remember Bobby Womack saying, uh, uh, if you can't, I'm up here holding the fort down for the whole show, and when I point to you and you play, you better be just as good as me, and maybe you're 30 seconds or whatever. Then I'm just, he was basically telling us, when your time comes, the torch passes, you
Right.
take it,
You're taking
you
the
go
shine.
for it. You know what I mean?
How
But
did how did you get to Hawaii? I got to imagine that it is tough
yeah,
to have a job like you have,
yeah,
and the weather is constantly, let's say 80 to 82 degrees. There's a breeze
yeah,
coming off the ocean, so it's
yeah.
cool. It's just a nice place to relax and just do it. But you're in Hawaii.
It's
I,
really a blessing. And believe it or not, um, I grew up in, playing in the hood in Oakland, and a lot of gangster ghetto clubs and stuff. And one of the guys I played with, Fulton Chishambi, who later became the musical director, the keyboard player for the Whispers.
mm-hmm,
And anyhow, I'd grown up playing with Fulton. He's passed on now, but he moved to Maui in maybe the early '80s and became like the greatest piano player and guy here. He was kind of like a Ray Charles kind of guy or something. Really talented, super great singer. And so he's the one that had started to say, "Hey, Rock, I got a gig on Maui here. Can you fly out and do this gig for me?" And I fell in love with the place. And since the early '80s, I've been coming here, and finally decided to make it my home. You know, and I really miss Fulton, who was my best friend, best man at my wedding, and he gave up his playing with the Whispers to live here.
mm-hmm.
And there was there was a lot of work here. There weren't enough musicians, and they had conventions and lots of gigs. And it was almost kind of like the Vegas Strip. Or I also worked in Honolulu in the golden days on the Strip there in Waikiki when they had music going like crazy. Things have died out now,
I just
for
I, I just can't imagine getting done with a gig and going, I'm just gonna go sit outside and relax, and it's palm trees and 85 degrees and a nice. Okay,
yeah.
in that respect, I envy you.
Oh
So
man.
what do you got going on now? What's in your future? What are you working on?
Well, to be frank with you, I just on a personal basis for since August, I had some health issues because I'm
Mhm.
69. I had what's called ventricular tachycardia, and that's when your heart speeds up and goes out of control fast. And luckily for me, my heart's strong. I don't never had a heart attack or blockage in my heart, but they could not figure out what was the heck wrong with me. And they tried to put a pacemaker in me. They put a defibrillator on me, and it had been shocking me. And for the last 6 months, I haven't played or done anything. People are on hold, waiting for me to get back better. So I'll tell you make a long story short. I'd had 6 COVID vaccinations.
Wow.
Then I got COVID back early last year, and that's when my heart problem started. And so what had happened was the COVID shots and the COVID on top of it had caused me to have what's called a storm, a viral storm in my heart. And it was called a ventricular tachycardia storm. And it was a viral infection in my heart from COVID. And I had to fly to Scripps on New Year's Eve in San Diego, the top electrophysiology hospital in the United States. And they found that I had scar tissue on the outside of my heart. But
Mm.
luckily for me, the viral infection had stopped and my heart's gone back to normal. I'm perfectly okay now. But when I told the doctors there that I'd had 6 COVID shots, believe it or not, they said, you should only had two and don't get any more, whatever you
Right.
do.
Mm-hmm.
So for everybody out there, I was always all for the shots. I had 6 of them.
Right.
But the doctors told me they have so many patients now that have heart arrhythmia and strokes and blood clots and all this stuff from COVID. And that so for all of you out there, that I was once a true believer in the shots, but I still got COVID. And what happened, it did cause me to have a viral infection of my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily I lived through it. So anyhow, now I'm back to normal. Paul Hardcastle and I are starting on Jazz Masters 8. Now, you're probably familiar with the Jazz Masters albums.
Yeah, I can't believe there's 8 of them.
It was so then what he's done on this one is a clue. Right before I got sick, he sent me a great song from George Michael's. It's like we had done one before with Marvin Gaye. We did the 40th anniversary of Marvin. It was called "What's Going On, Rainforest." It's kind of a mashup remix with Marvin's actual voice, and you could listen to that later. But then what we did George Michael's, and it was a song called "Christ to the Child." Beautiful song, and it's got him singing, and then I'm doing the sax, kind of a sax duet thing with George Michael's out of the vault. That'll probably be coming out on Jazz Masters 8. And then we're doing another one right now as we speak. And it's a Emerson, Lake and Palmer song. It's a tribute to Greg Lake, the guitar player who passed away recently. And we're going to be using some of the tracks from Emerson, Lake and Palmer on that track. It's one of their hit songs that they did. And so it's kind of cool how he's taking these songs and redoing them. But Jazz Masters, I guarantee, will be #1 on Billboard before it even comes out, just from pre-sales.
You'll have to make sure that we get a copy that we can put on our social media and get fans to listen to it. We will look forward to that. Rock, this has been neat. I'm tempted to ask a whole bunch of other questions, but
anytime, call me anytime you want.
Portia would be going, Daryl, you got to cut this off. You got to cut this off because there's so many stories. And there's so many people like I want to ask you about, too, and playing with us. Paul Hardcastle being one of them.
Call me anytime, you guys.
Okay. Appreciate the time. Rock, it's been a pleasure. We'll call you back and get more stories. Maybe we'll just do, here you go, Portia. We'll do.
Yeah, that's for sure.
We'll do story time with Rock. I like that.
Yes, sir. In Hawaii, they call it talk story.
Okay, that's what we'll do.
Yeah.
Appreciate the time. We'll do this again. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Jazz Flyte podcast. I'm Daryl Scott. Hidden away in a cube in front of me is Portia, the producer, and our guest has been Rock Hendricks. We will talk to you next week. Thank you for tuning in to the Jazz Flyte podcast. I hope you enjoy the stories and soulful melodies that grew through the doors of time. If you want to stay connected with the latest updates and episodes, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Until next time, I'm Daryl Scott.